We had a really terrific roundtable on reinventing the tech industry's social impact. What was cool about it was it had a big picture, long view lens to this. We look back on what's different in this tech boom compared to the last time we saw a big boom. Some interesting perspective there. We saw a range of things that are happening now that many people are not aware of how much is happening in this space.
I think what's different is a couple of things. One is the scale of it, especially in San Francisco. The tech community has moved in San Francisco in a much more substantial way than ever before. The traffic issues, the housing price issues. But secondly, as you point out, the capacity then to do good and to improve is greatly increased as well.
A lot of the individuals who are coming out of Stanford looking to start something are really looking to embed mission in what they're doing. There's a huge number of founders who are thinking, how do I achieve long-term positive social impact?
Startups are just now starting to begin incorporating philanthropy, and I think in some ways it's being driven by VCs or accelerators. There was an a millennial impact study in 2012 that came out asking millennials about their giving trends, their philanthropy. 83% of them had given to charity, and 73% were actively engaged in volunteering.
I'll echo the sort of generational sentiment. I think we see this across the board with our companies. Younger folks coming out of school, they don't have the cognitive bias, I think, of the previous generation, which is we make a bunch of money and then we give it away. It's, how do I have meaning and purpose and impact with what I'm doing with my time every day? And I thought I'd share a little bit. We've kind of looked at all the venture deals that have been done. Basically, in the last 6 years, like 15-fold growth in the number of companies getting funded that, in our terminology, sort of pass a goosebumps filter, right? So they're actually working on stuff, that matters. So I think that as that narrative gets more into the mainstream, that, hey, you're not going to perform as well as a business. You're not going to be able to recruit, great talent unless you're being really thoughtful about how what you're doing matters and what your values are as a company. I think that begins to, sort of further accelerate the cultural shift.
The opening of a couple of agencies here in DC in the federal government, they just haven't had a lot of difficulty recruiting really great talent to come from California to DC, in part because people are starved to be working on important issues.
But it's pointed out that technology is a mature industry now, and in fact, an extremely powerful one. It has to go beyond its own self-interest and really start to think about what it can do for the broader society in more selfless ways. A lot of cool ideas came out that way.
Really leveraging the political power, really the influence of the tech community and workers to lobby for things that are good for the community as a whole. Lots of politicians come here, looking, do fundraisers, looking to raise money. I think it's really important that people in the community ask, what are you doing for transportation? What are you doing for housing? We're not going to pass around a hat and crowdfund a BART extension to San Jose.
So I think that sort of going forward in the future, we need to be very wary of ideas and suggestions that we have for how companies can change themselves and do things better, because it needs to always be in perspective of what the community needs.
I think it's really important that the tech community come in with humility. So it's really important to kind of come in and listen and to figure out what the needs are, and and be humble about folks in the tech world can and cannot help.
Underneath it all, I think that the fundamental issue we have is that technology at a very macro level is a massively democratizing force, but there are a lot of people that are sort of left out beyond gentrification in terms of people is sort of how do we get more people participating in what's going on.
There's definitely a ton of tension going on here in San Francisco between folks that have lived here for a long time, folks who are being forced out of the neighborhood because of the high price of real estate, and often the tech community gets a lot of blame for that.
I mean, there's organizations like the Eviction Defense Collaborative here in San Francisco who do amazing work, and they've been embedded in these communities defending the diverse makeup of San Francisco for decades now. And one of the things that they've been desperate for is for more technology and more technologists to be coming in and getting involved with what they've been doing, I mean, what this I think speaks to is what we were talking about earlier in terms of the notion of empathy and actually listening to what communities are asking for rather than trying to impose a solution. I think by working with these kinds of organizations in a sort of collective impact framework where they're setting the metrics because they understand, what the real needs are, and then we as a tech community can come in and support them in achieving those, and blowing those metrics out of the ballpark.
This thing I wanted to talk about ways that tech is connecting with people. A new way in San Francisco is through the public schools. And there's a program to try and connect individual tech companies with individual schools. To be in this program, you have to commit to a company has to commit to being involved with the school for 1 year, and they are listening. They don't tell the school, oh, we're going to come over and we're going to give you 20 laptops or what have you. They listen to what the school needs.
And then there was a lot of big idea brainstorming about the kind of big initiatives that the tech industry could do. I mean, it's one of the few industries that could really throw a lot of talent, a lot of focus, a lot of resources on really solving complicated problems. And so who better than the tech industry to really take the lead on the big issues facing us?
Whenever I write a story about tech philanthropy, whether it be giving in time or money to various causes, invariably I hear from people in the community who say, why don't they just create a big housing fund? You could do a pilot program in San Francisco.
One sort of latent asset that I think about that's not being used is, for the very biggest companies, they're sitting on enormous amounts of cash on their balance sheet. If we can figure out how sort of economics work, assuming the politics can work and everything else, such that they can utilize that cash in a way that's sort of favorable relative to what they're already doing, right? They're earning very little interest. Now they're taking very little risk, but I think there's a way to sort of construct a real estate product where they don't need to get market rate real estate returns, right? Like they'd be happy getting 1 or 2% returns back to Treasury, which would be a gain over what, the cash is doing. A lot of these companies, Google, Apple, have billions of dollars of money that is sitting offshore that they don't bring back because then they'd have to pay tax on that money. So what if, we were able to pass some legislation which said, hey, if you bring that money back, and you invest it into this affordable, housing fund, right? Then we're gonna waive the taxes on it, or there'll be a bunch of tax incentives for you to do that here.
There was definitely a general sense by the end of it that we had accomplished quite a bit. We had come up with a lot of interesting new ideas, and certainly there was a lot of optimism about what could be done going forward.
First of all, this has been a great discussion, and I really enjoyed it. And I think I got about 4 new story ideas out of it. And I'd love to see somebody try and synthesize all these ideas, because to do things like what you're doing, Pete, and try and take this, harness all this brain power and focus them on ideas like affordable housing. And it's something you can't just throw money at. You have to throw money at it smartly. And if there's one thing that the tech folks do well, they want to see metrics, and they'll try a lot of different things, and they'll keep trying it until they get a solution.
In fact, I think we need to have a mindset shift, a social mindset shift, where business can only exist if it contributes positively to society.
David, what you were saying about, companies should only exist to contribute positively to society. I mean, I think we as technologists can be that optimistic, and we should, spread that optimism as far and wide as possible.
The issues we're talking about, how can we create economic opportunity for everyone? How can we make sure there's housing to create a diverse community we all want to live in? How can we make sure there's education systems such that everyone gets a fair start and equal opportunity to learn? But I think what we've come to, right, is that the tech community has both a particular responsibility in some of these areas, because some of these areas we're actually helping cause the problems, but also particular potential to solve them. Let's really tackle housing. It's what can we do for climate change? Let's tackle the big issues.
This community, more than any other community, has the ability to solve really complicated problems. So if we had the sort of will and the desire, along with the humility and the empathy, there's no question in my mind that we could really address this in a powerful way and set an example for other communities.